A group of people reach a mysterious island and meet the most terrifying monsters in the world. This is Kong Skull Island, and it's a real survival game. The Second World War is in full swing. Two military planes crash on an island in the Pacific Ocean. The pilots manage to eject. One of them is Japanese and the other one is American. They are enemies. That's why they continue fighting even on the ground. At first, the men use weapons, but when they run out of bullets, the Japanese man starts chasing after the American and soon the pilots end up in a jungle. The American man finds himself standing on the edge of a cliff, and the Japanese man has a katana. A hand-to-hand combat ensues between the pilots, but suddenly the combat stops. This is a giant gorilla. The pilots look at it in horror. Almost 30 years go by. A scientist, Bill Randa, and his assistant Brooks come to the senator to ask him to approve an expedition to Skull Island. The thing is, this island is very isolated from the rest of the world, which means something unusual can be found there. The senator isn't happy about this idea, but still he agrees to it and is even ready to provide the scientists with military escort. Meanwhile, the war in Vietnam is coming to an end. The American pilots get ready to go home. They are happy to return to peaceful life. However, there is a person who is disappointed with how the war has ended. It's Colonel Packard. He has neither a family nor a job. All he knows is war. Packard receives a phone call from the general. He is ordered to accompany an expedition team of scientists to Skull Island. In the meantime, Randa and Brooks head to Saigon to visit one night bar, where they notice a man with excellent fighting skills. He is a former Captain James Conrad. He is a specialist in jungle survival, so the scientists employ him as a tracker for their team. A famous anti-war photographer, Mason Weaver, is also invited to join the expedition. The expedition members gather aboard a ship in Bangkok. The soldiers get angry because they wanted to go home from Vietnam rather than go on a new mission. Weaver arrives and notices Colonel Packard. They dislike each other because the man is from the military and the woman is against any wars. The expedition team is shown Skull Island and the people are introduced to one another. We see Randa and his two assistants. They are Brooks and Sun Lin. Also, there is Packard with his soldiers, photographer Weaver, tracker Conrad, and a few more scientists. These people will have to spend 3 full days on the island without contact with the outside world. A huge amount of explosives are loaded onto the vessel. This seems suspicious to Weaver. Conrad also thinks that the scientists hide something from them. The ship ventures into the open sea. The soldiers fool around and the photographer takes photos of them. Only 50 miles separate them from the island. However, a storm blows up suddenly. The team's leadership wants to cancel the mission, but Randa starts arguing and wants to keep going. The expedition team switches to a military helicopter and flies to Skull Island. A storm breaks at the same time. Packard is thrilled because he feels like a hero again. The helicopter literally flies through the storm. Lightning strikes very close. However, all the helicopters manage to break through the storm and reach Skull Island. It's very big and picturesque. There are lots of cliffs and lush green jungle on it. Weaver takes several photos. The helicopters start landing. The group of geologists conducts their first experiment by carrying out a series of explosions right away. With the help of her devices, seismologist Sun Lin determines that the island is practically hollow on the inside. Suddenly, a tree is thrown at one of the helicopters and it crashes. At this very moment, a huge gorilla attacks the expedition team. Packard orders to fire at it, and the enraged ape throws the helicopters in all directions. He tramples the fallen helicopters and destroys the scientists' equipment. Some of the people descend on ropes and hide from the gorilla. Soon, there will be no helicopters left in the sky. The ape crushes them like toys. There are heavy civilian and military casualties. The surviving expedition members are scattered across the island within a radius of 8 kilometers. Packard is awestruck and watches the gigantic gorilla in horror. We can see that Conrad survives and watches the crazy ape. He finds a few more expedition members and suggests that they all go along the river to the north of the island. A ship is supposed to await them there in 3 days. Packard contacts Conrad and Major Chapman using a walkie-talkie. The colonel orders Chapman to stay put, because there is a huge amount of ammunition in his helicopter. Packard finds more of his soldiers. Turns out exactly half of his detachment has survived. The colonel notices Randa. The scientist speaks the truth at gunpoint. Randa reveals that a warship sank here many years ago. He is the sole survivor. Randa saw a giant creature attack it and decided to find it at any cost. Conrad along with his group make their way through the jungle. Brooks boasts that the Hollow Earth theory is proven. The walkie-talkie disconnects. The signal is lost. The people keep on going to the northern tip of the island. On reaching the river, Conrad's group encounters a big buffalo. Oh no, a huge buffalo. As an experienced pathfinder, Conrad forbids to use weapons. If you don't make sudden movements, the animal won't attack. This is what happens. The buffalo leaves quietly. Packard's group is way less fortunate. Having buried their comrades, they embark on a journey and meet a gigantic predatory spider. The soldiers immediately start trying to fight off the creepy creatures, but they are too big. Soon they realize they need to chop off their legs. The soldiers win, but after this battle, there are only few of them left. Meanwhile, Conrad's group meets with a group of indigenous people wearing war paint. They are armed with spears and are very unfriendly. Suddenly, a white man with a beard wearing a cap shows up among the natives and asks everyone to calm down. He speaks English. Turns out this is Lieutenant Hank Marlowe. He is an American pilot and has lived on the island for almost 30 years. Yes, this is the very pilot we saw at the beginning of the film. Marlowe is very happy to finally have been found, but he warns that the island is very dangerous. In the meantime, Chapman is watching his face in the river. Soon a giant gorilla appears. Seems like this giant wants to bathe. Chapman is hiding behind a rock and sees the ape bathing in the water. Suddenly, a huge octopus attacks it. Seems like there are no normal-sized animals on the island. The octopus is trying to drag the gorilla to the riverbed with its tentacles, but the ape defeats it and eats its prey with pleasure. Back to Conrad's team. Marlowe takes his team to a small indigenous settlement and shows the people the wreckage of the crashed warship. It's a sacred place for the natives, and they have turned it into a real temple. We learn that the island's inhabitants call the giant gorilla Kong and consider him to be the island's king. The thing is, Kong protects the people from school crawlers. They are giant reptiles living underground. Alas, because of the explosion, they started crawling out of the ground. This is why Kong was so enraged. The problem is that the biggest school crawler is even bigger than Kong himself and has eaten all of his relatives. Conrad offers Marlowe to leave along with the team and return home. The man only laughs in response, because they won't make it to the edge of the island on foot in 3 days. But Marlowe has a better idea. Turns out that many years ago, he and a Japanese pilot built a boat. You can move a lot faster on it. What a great plan. Weaver takes a lot of photos in order to show the world how the local indigenous people look. Suddenly, the woman hears someone's roar. She runs in the direction of the sound and sees a huge buffalo trapped under one of the crashed military helicopters. Weaver tries to free the poor animal, but obviously her strength alone doesn't suffice. This is when Kong comes to her aid. He lifts off the helicopter and the buffalo leaves. The woman watches the giant ape in horror and thinks she will die. Kong, however, doesn't touch her and leaves. Meanwhile, Packard's team makes its way through the swamp and studies the local fauna. The colonel shoots at one weird bird and notices that there is a large amount of them here. The soldiers worry that they may not reach the edge of the island in time, and that they won't stand a chance of survival. Packard notices an enormous red palm print on a rock. This means that Kong is injured. Conrad's team fixes the boat. They have 2 days to reach the northern coast. People share news of what has happened in the last 30 years with Marlowe. He is surprised by the Cold War, moon landing, and sports news. In the meantime, Chapman tries to contact someone using a walkie-talkie unsuccessfully. Suddenly, a tree he sits on starts moving. It's a real gigantic mantis. Chapman grabs his rifle and the mantis leaves. But it wasn't the human who scared him, but rather it was a much scarier monster. People on Conrad's team intend to set sail at dawn. Marlowe trims his beard. Brooks is happy that the earth is hollow after all, and Conrad's help Weaver to take another beautiful photo. People on Packett's team also settle in for the night. The Colonel dreams of destroying Kong. At dawn, Marlowe shows the people the grave of the deceased Japanese pilot. He takes his katana, and the team is finally ready to set sail. They start the boat and say goodbye to the indigenous people. All the expedition members continue their journey. At last, the walkie-talkie starts working, and Conrad's team contacts Packett's team. The soldiers light a signal flare in order to show their location. Suddenly, a flying reptile descends on the boat and takes away one of the geologists. This monster has not come alone. They are too quick, that's why the poor thing couldn't be saved. Anyway, they need to keep sailing. Fortunately, in an hour both teams finally meet. People are very happy to see one another. Conrad wants to keep sailing, but Packard refuses to do it. He wants to find Chapman and the helicopter with the explosives. Marlowe is against this plan, because they may encounter school crawlers. Still, people decide that they can't leave their comrade in the jungle. The United team sets out on a journey. They cross the valley and see a lot of huge skeletons in it. They seem to be those of Kong's congeners that became lunch for the school crawlers. People find themselves in a thick green methane cloud. A not-so-smart soldier throws a butt and the gas explodes. This awakens a huge reptile and it starts hunting. The expedition members hide from the monster in the remains of a huge skeleton. The school crawler vomits a skull with a medallion and Conrad realizes that this is the skull of the deceased Chapman. Packett's soldiers charge into battle, but the huge reptile manages to wolf down Randa and one more person. It chases after Weaver, and the woman gets saved only thanks to a flamethrower. A series of explosions is heard. People fly off in different directions. Flying reptiles attack them, and a real chaos ensues. Conrad cuts the creatures with a sharp katana in a gas mask. He rescues one of the expedition members, and then another massive explosion happens. The reptile is finally defeated. Chapman is no more, which means the team can return to the boat. But Packard still wants to get to the helicopter and blow up Kong. Marlowe tries to dissuade him, but he fails. Some of the people go to the boat with Conrad, and Packard heads to the crash site of Chapman's helicopter along with his soldiers. They find explosives and load their guns. Conrad walks up a hill with Weaver in order to see the river and checks where their boat is. Kong approaches them, but he doesn't attack them again and even allows them to pet him. This is when Conrad, Weaver and Marlowe decide to save the ape. Meanwhile, Packard tries to set Kong on fire with the help of napalm. The burned gorilla falls to the ground. Packard has mined this area and is ready to blow up Kong at any moment. Conrad approaches the colonel with his team. They convince him with weapons not to harm Kong. At this moment, a giant school crawler shows up and Kong engages in single combat with him. Packard wants to blow up both of them, but he is late because Kong crushes him with his fist like a fly. Alas, the ape is seriously injured and the reptile quickly stuns him. Dawn breaks. People run towards the boat chased by a giant school crawler. One of the soldiers sacrifices his life in order to stop the monster. But things don't go according to plan. The school crawler is about to catch up with the people, but then Kong enters the scene and attacks the reptile. A real battle for survival begins. Kong is stronger, but he is injured. The ape uses uses a tree trunk as a spear, but then he gets entangled in the chains left by the people. The Skullcrawler wants to finish off his opponent, but Brooks fires at the reptile from a machine gun. Then the monster leaves Kong alone and instead attacks the boat. Kong frees himself from the chains and attacks the reptile again. He throws the Skullcrawler against the rock Weaver stood on. The woman falls down into the water. In the meantime, the single combat continues and Kong seriously injures his opponent. The huge ape carefully takes Weaver out of the water, and at this moment, the Skullcrawler attacks him again. Kong has to hide the woman in his fist and continues fighting. At last, the reptile is defeated. Kong carefully puts Weaver on the riverbank. Conrad finds her there. Gorilla looks at the people and leaves. The expedition team leaves the island. They promise to keep everything that happened on the island a secret. By the way, Marlowe returns to his wife and son, while Kong continues living on the island, because he is a real king there. It seems to me that Kong is asking you to give this video a like. Subscribe to the channel in order not to miss the most interesting videos. I'll see you soon.